All right, thank you so much for coming to the Sashiko Dialogue, Volume 4 with Tai. This is Atsushi, and we will discuss about Sashiko here with some questions and topics. Today, we will talk about Upstream, and we have been talking last 45 minutes already. And without this opening phrase, we started talking, catching up with each other. And we got into the actual topic and we kind of couldn't stop each other. As a result, we kind of finished filming at this moment already. At the same time, I wanted to have this kind of opening up section so that he can edit nicely to see what's going on in the actual conversation. Thank you so much for coming to this dialogue, Tai. How are you doing?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here all the time.
Thank you. How are you?
I mean, I'm doing well. I had a great discussion just now, but I'm really feeling grateful because it was something that wasn't very well. I mean, for you guys, it's in the future, but
Yeah.
it's something very meaningful and could be difficult to wrap your head around sometimes. But the core of it really isn't something that's far from how we normally are as people. And I don't think it needs to be something that we have to be scared of or glorify in a sense. We just have to care.
There we go. Well, if you have any comments or questions, please leave it to the comment section, and we will come back to this dialogue 5. And if you have any request for Tai to ask me the question, that's very much appreciated. We can also have some topic to discuss. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Probably today's key is the upstream. Is it
Yeah.
okay? Like upstream is okay, probably?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely just leads into that whole thing because I was going to ask you, like, what forms does acknowledgement take?
Yeah.
Because I was going to
So
open up kind of asking you that initial question of like work like my work like this. Like, I wouldn't want to share it and have people think this is the way Sashiko is, you know?
I'm sorry. I'm gonna probably
Uh,
add that, but long story short, that is the
yeah.
Sashiko. The Sashiko. What you're doing right now is the Sashiko.
Is it?
Like you are stitching to add some story to your denim, right?
I mean, I am personally, but I wouldn't want to define my own work as everything.
Like if I don't define that as the Sashiko, I don't know what Sashiko is then.
This
Like
would I always kind of see my own stuff as like my own little bubble, you know. I never really
it
thought
is.
it.
It is your own bubble. So you don't have to, of course, call it Sashiko. If you have any other word, please
Mhm.
use that. At the same time, it is this Sashiko, and it is the authentic Sashiko as it can be. Like if you call that the Sashiko, I'm very happy to say like, well, this is the Sashiko too. It doesn't have to be the pattern. It doesn't have to be like nobody's stitch for the survival at this age, right?
Mhm.
If you are stitching for survival, I might recommend you to do something else.
Definitely.
There's like a little good work right now, hourly paid job, so that might be better to do that. So we choose to stitch, and the reason we choose to stitch is to add some stories, and you're trying to acknowledge, you're trying to learn what Sashiko is, and that's pretty much everything.
Yeah, because my initial thought process kind of looking at this was definitely more, I guess you would say on like a superficial level, because I would always want to consider my work Sashiko, but I know I didn't have that background or
Yeah,
like the same.
background doesn't matter. But if you start saying that, that's a very, very interesting thing. But if you started saying that you know everything about Sashiko, then you kind of start moving
Mhm.
away from what Sashiko is. Does it
Yeah,
make sense?
because I
Yeah.
wouldn't say I know. I just didn't want people to see things like this where it's like,
So
but
it's
that's once again it's superficial. But I was concerned that I wouldn't want to lead people down. Not if they stayed around, but like if someone was just to see it and think, oh, this is Hashika,
it is
you know,
though.
I wouldn't want to limit what.
it is. It is more Sashiko than anything I've ever seen last couple weeks. So That's the answer to that question, but let's start there. You can use this part if you wish. Like,
kind of just throws me for like a loop, man.
it's like a philosophy for that matter. I don't want to go into philosophy, but the phrase I always say, like, if you worry about the cultural appropriation, don't worry about it. If you don't worry about cultural appropriation, please do worry about it.
Yeah.
But that kind of explains everything. If you're worrying about it, you're trying to respect it. As the result, you don't have to worry about it. But if you think that a cultural appropriation is BS, then you may want a little bit more learn what's going on out there. So cultural appropriation does not exist when we all care each other, but in order to avoid the cultural appropriation, we have to kind of know what the cultural appropriation is. See, like it's real philosophical.
Yeah, and I know we talk a lot about like the importance of acknowledgement throughout all of
Yeah.
Sashiko.
So
And I think, oh, continue.
go ahead.
I think it can be, I wouldn't say difficult, but definitely when we constantly hear to acknowledge. And I guess that kind of loops, it could loop back around to the idea like if you're worrying about it, don't worry. But I'm constantly worried about how can I do that? Because acknowledgement isn't necessarily a tangible thing. Because if I showed you this and I said, I just want to make money off this, I thought it looked cool,
That's also
I
Sashiko
wouldn't
too.
be, huh?
That's also Sashiko too. If you decided to say I want to make money, that's also the part of Sashiko.
But like not in that sense, more of like as in like I didn't really care about anything going on. Like I, I'm meaning to say I don't, since acknowledgement is not something that's tangible, how do we create something tangible? And maybe that's something I have a problem with because I think I see things more objectively.
Mm.
Now I don't know if that's a Western thing or just a me thing. But if it's not tangible, I kind of doubt myself on how I'm really doing with it or how to measure myself on that scale.
Yeah, so you kind of underestimate your understanding. And as long as we kind of underestimate ourselves, I think we call that like a politeness, humble, courtesies, whatever we call that, then the
Mhm.
culture will not be overpainted that easily because you will not call yourself as the master of Sashiko by just doing one class. Unfortunately, you're very rare in this society because in order to sell, in order to make money, in order to be artists, in order to be picked up, in order to be well known, what they want to hear is that you're somewhat special. So somewhat you have to make yourself, you don't have to overestimate yourself, but you have to at least be okay with being overestimated. Like I am overestimated in my opinion.
Mhm.
And I can say I'm not, I can just stop saying whatever I can stop speaking up. But people don't like that because they need me to be sort of the figure, like icon at this moment.
Mhm.
So I am trying to be okay with being overestimated, although I underestimate what I do. So what you're trying to do is very much like Japanese mindset. I cannot believe you. Do you have any friends Japanese or you like anybody in Japanese family? It's very, very
No,
Japanese. And I really kind of funny to find out that it does not only exist in Japanese culture, it exists in many, many cultures. Like Jewish culture can be kind of similar to that too, at some point. And probably, your culture has those similarities. But my point is acknowledgement is the kind of easiest way and simplest way to appreciate the culture. And if we digging deeper, then we have to make conditions. Like for example, if is the condition, right? If you do
yeah.
this, that's gonna be acknowledged. Um, but when we make conditions of if, then it's gonna be more difficult to um, by making the condition of if, we will start making the authorities. And when the authorities kicks in Sashiko, then there's not gonna be Sashiko there. So I don't want to be the authority. I don't want to be the authority. At the same time, I don't want to worry about the authority.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, not even myself, but probably people in the audience as well, kind of wouldn't say feel the need for an authority, but without once again, it kind of comes back around to like having answers. I mean, we spoke about this in different dialogues, but and I do completely understand your message now. Well, I wouldn't say completely, but I'm
Yeah, you
better
can
than I
say
was
completely.
5 minutes ago. It can be difficult to kind of get to that point of processing when you don't really have the structure to process it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And I don't know if that works for you, but for me, I like to, I wouldn't say have walls, but if there's a certain field that I don't really feel like I fit in or don't understand or wouldn't say I understand, it's almost like having walls gives you an area to start understanding. And I don't think that's necessary, but I think that's usually what people are looking for.
yes. And sorry today.
No worries.
I understand the need of that because without those authorities, or let's say easier, certification or like license or some permission, it
Mhm.
is very uneasy to be someone. You need some protections when you speak up. If you have a license, if you have a certification, you have a, you know, those barriers, as you say, you will be protected somehow. Um, that's why we need answers. That's why we would like to have something. But Sashiko existed outside of that system. So, but again, in order to sort of, it is already in the system. Sashiko in English is already in the system. And I think what I'm trying to do is to get the Sashiko out of that, I think. So as the result, I have to kind of fight through those answers. And your reaction is really, really not rare. It's very much everybody's suffering from like, am I good enough? Am I doing okay? And I cannot say are you doing okay? Because then I will be authority, right?
Yeah.
So if you define your Sashiko as Sashiko because of what I say, then I am already the authority, which I don't want to be. So my goal is for you is for none of you, but my goal for people is that they will be happy, they will be comfortable to call their stitching Sashiko only if they want to, though, if they want to. And that's the future of Sashiko. Of course, for that, I want them to learn something that they don't know, but learning is not gonna be completed at some point, like diploma or degree. It's continuous learning. And only things I can say to describe that learning is the acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So, well, we kind of concluded the talk, but let's start.
I know it's kind of funny, but
You can use everything here, but at the same time,
I'm glad not everything has to be complicated though. And I don't think this is a complicated idea, but I think it's important to kind of lay out
it is
at
complicated.
once.
It is complicated to the American people, though. I don't want to say Western people because that might be including European people, but for the American people, the fact that there's no authority is probably difficult. Like you can
Definitely.
do whatever you want, but you cannot do whatever you want. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So those two sentences are kind of contradicting each other, right? You can do whatever you want at the same time as you cannot do whatever you want. And this does not make sense at all. But Sashiko Sashiko exists within that frame. I need to.
And I think that comes back to at least as American. I mean, I wouldn't say as Americans because I'm not speaking for 300 million people,
Yeah, like let's
but
not use the big subject, but yeah, as the somebody who was born in the US.
yeah, but I think it wraps back around to like that idea of even when I've asked you the question in the first place, it's because I didn't have something tangible. So trying to, or I'd say it's difficult to create something in your head that isn't existing and doesn't have to be physically existing, but like you said, it's kind of two things at the same time, and that's more difficult for me to wrap my head around than things that should be more difficult, if that makes sense. Like it's just out of my norm,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's out of a lot of people's norm. So I think it's not a complicated idea; it's just a foreign idea. So it's really kind of it, man.
It is.
You just gotta take
We
things slow.
it is probably very, very simple and easy things when they can jump that wall, but jumping
Hmm.
that wall is very, very, very challenging. And it's kind of weird for me because I'm from the other side of the wall. I'm quite unique in Japan too. I'm not really the Japanese because the stories I received is kind of too old. They were talking about like they were like 80 years old, 90 years old when I was a child. So I'm like from the pre World War II for that matter.
Hmm.
So like today's Japanese people probably don't think like I do. At the same time, Sashiko is from that kind of old practice. And I don't talk on behalf of Japanese people, but I can talk on behalf of those Japanese Sashiko stitchers. And I should probably talk on behalf of them. And for that very, very limited field, I am from the outside of the wall. And there's so many kind of people in the wall. And I'm trying to help. Not a help. I'm trying to tell them that it's not that difficult to jump over. But in order to do that, you have to know how low that wall is.
Yeah, that's another question I have for you. Is kind of not really relating to the topic necessarily, but relating to this little dialogue we're having now. You say like you're kind of like an outsider in Japanese culture as well. So how do you how do you function over there? How do you fit in?
I didn't.
Do you feel like you have a place in Japanese Sashiko? Or like the people back from your oh my God, I really worded that horribly. I'm gonna ask you one more time just so I can do it nicely.
You can say that. Don't worry about it. That's a very good way to say it. I like that, how you said it.
Mhm.
Do I have a place to fit in the Japanese Sashiko?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I didn't. That's why I'm here.
Hmm.
That is why I'm speaking English. If I were a good, let's say, typical Japanese, I would have been in the family business and stitching for them right now, even at this point. And I would accept the fate of being wiped away from somebody else. So, like, the family I grew up with, or people who I grew up with, did not think about the future much. They were proud of what they did. At the same time, the future is more like the luck, or it's out of their power, it's out of their control. So if the future did not choose Sashiko, they would be fine with going down with that. And my father was like that, and I would have been like that. And there's so many Sashiko art, not Sashiko. There's so many artisans like that in Japan. One example is like the Sashiko thread maker who had been making Sashiko thread for us. They discontinued doing Sashiko and he passed away without passing that to somebody else. Specifically, we got fortunate to have that passed down to us to somebody else in Japan, so we did not lose it. But there's so many practice, culture, wisdom, and I don't want to say tradition much, but those like a skill, wisdom are lost because they accept the future of not chosen. And I did not like that idea.
Hmm.
I was more, mm, I think I was more individualistic in terms of what I wanted to do and what I did not want to do. And back then, Sashiko was just the fairly boring, old-fashioned, kind of phony, I guess. I don't know the word for that, but not stylish at all. I did not like what I was doing. As a result, I came outside of the Japan, and even now, I don't think I will. I am like I'm very, very authentic Japanese. I am authentic. I don't know what authentic Japanese is, but I am a Japanese who was born in Japan, but I don't think I will fit into the culture so easily. Therefore, I do have the Japanese live streaming last 6 years continuously. I'm so
Yeah.
worried that if my words are not Japanese like I kind of sometimes speak on behalf of Japanese, right? I'm not 100% sure if the word are like Japanese people think though, because I don't have that confidence. What I'm saying right now might not be what they think, and I'm very much worried about it. As the result, I ask the Japanese people if what I'm saying is completely crazy or somewhat reasonable. And as long as they say like somewhat reasonable, I can keep going. But I keep asking them, please let me know if I start saying something completely crazy, or even a little bit crazy for that matter.
Yeah.
And as of now, they're okay. So
Would you
go ahead.
sorry. Would you consider that your upstream?
That's a very good question. My upstream is very boring and old-fashioned. At the same time, this upstream of there are two upstream, right? The upstream of Japanese as me doing Sashiko right now is from the other people who I met in 2011, which we can talk about it probably in the future.
Mhm.
And another upstream I receive is probably like from my mom, who is quite also different from other typical Japanese. She is like artist. But when I say upstream is that like those collective idea of Sashiko that I received, which I tried to not to take it, which I kind of resisted to receive, is the upstream that I'm speaking of right now. So
Yeah.
do I receive that? I don't know. I don't know if I am following that upstream as well, but at least I know where it is and I know what that upstream is like. It's really, it can be nasty. Like
As in like the people?
so we don't really talk about others. We don't have like dispute. We don't like argument. We don't have any war between Sashikos. Like there's so many Sashikos that we don't have any legal dispute or any like lawsuit case. No war. We don't argue each other, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we like each other. So behind the scene, we talk to each other sometimes. I don't know, but back then, without the internet, we can do a lot of things. With the internet, it becomes more surface, right?
Oh!
You laugh too much. But this existed when we didn't have internet. It can be quite like there's no, you know, no limit.
Mhm.
We have a limit right now thanks to the internet, right? People say like that's too much, yo. That's really
Yeah.
over the limit. Back then they didn't have limit. They just didn't go into the war because we don't like the argument. But I've heard a lot of nasty things, and but yeah, that's the upstream. But I'm not expecting everybody to understand what upstream is because I don't even know what upstream is like in the full picture. I think what I'm trying to ask is to acknowledge that upstream exists.
Yeah.
So, and ideally where, possibly, about where, which mountain, where, and about when, I guess. But I'm not asking them to go to the upstream and then try that water. Like I'm not gonna say if you do not go to the upstream and if you don't drink that water, you're not certified to do Sashiko. I don't say that. It's
Yeah.
impossible to go there because it's those people who made upstream is very very difficult to get to. But it does not mean that upstream doesn't exist. So acknowledgement that upstream exists around somewhere there.
No, that definitely makes sense. And like you said, even with yourself, you don't necessarily follow in the exact footsteps, but knowing that it's there, like you said. And I'm just kind of rephrasing, but I think it's important to note that like
Yep.
you don't have to be a perfect role model, but knowing it and not even just understanding it, but
Yeah, knowing it is.
yeah.
I'm a very big believer of people are decent. People are born like an angel. there are like two ways, right? To think about people born like evil, people born with good intention. And I am a big believer that we are decent by nature. So the very unfortunate thing is that doing the harm without knowing it. So ignorance can be very, very bad thing because we can harm something because we do not know that. But as the worst case scenario, there are people who intentionally ignore that fact to intentionally damage the thing. And that's something I think we have to fight against. But acknowledgement can prevent that because we are decent by nature. We do something very harmful because simply we don't know it. But once
Yeah.
we acknowledge that, the majority of us can be decent. So, well, because of the internet, again, things are happening over the screen. And acknowledgement itself might not be strong enough to start caring about those things. At the same time, we are decent enough to help others when we know that somebody else are suffering. So I hope that acknowledgement itself can sort of not help, but support the sustainability of this culture.